Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab, sponsored by CPA Practice Advisor, with your hosts, Randy Johnston and Brian Tankersley.
Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab. I'm your host, Randy Johnston, with co-host Brian Tankersley, and we want to talk today about the talent shortages and the accounting pipeline. We're really doing this in the context of the CPA Practice Advisors Accounting Leaders Think Tank Symposium that Brian and I could attend on June 8th here in 2025. Now, we were fortunate because there were a lot of young thought leaders in the room, 40 under 40 were all invited, and many other thought leaders who have been in the profession for some time were also invited, so we could mix and share ideas. And one section that we handled in content was the idea behind recruiting personnel. Now, we know the problem is actually improving, and we know that there are more students going into college trying to get degrees, but we also know the numbers still are unfavorable. However, we were fortunate enough also last night to be invited to the AICPA's Thought Leader Dinner and reception, and I thought it was very fascinating that Mark Koziel, the new president, said, look, there's 600,000 CPA members in the AICPA. If only half encouraged one person to become a CPA, that would be 300,000, and it would go a long way in fixing the pipeline problem in the United States. All kind of interesting thoughts as far as I was concerned. But we know that the amount of labor needed is likely to drop because of AI. You can listen to our other session on AI from this same event, the Think Tank Symposium. But we also suspect that there will be some onshoring of labor. And one of the comments that was made during this session was that there might be a trend, if allowed, to take some of the offshore labor that's being used and bring them in as U.S. citizens, and they would be onshore, which was kind of an interesting solution to the problem. So, again, in this episode, we're not really trying to say, here's how you should solve this problem, because you could do outsourced labor and you could use more AI and automation. But we're really trying to convey things that you wouldn't have other seen behind the closed door meeting. We do have to follow Chatham's rules on this, where we can't really attribute anything to any person without their permission. But Brian and I wanted to give you an idea of what was being said about this issue of the pipeline of talent and people. So, Brian, I don't think this is rocket science, but I'd like to hear your one or two or three things that you thought you learned, and I'll do the same thing.
Well, first off, let me before I jump into the three, let me say here that one of the learnings that I've had simultaneously by reading, Dan Hood at Accounting Today and, Isaac and CPA Practice Advisor and other folks like that, is that it appears that private equity is pushing more and more of this work offshore. And with these private equity roll-ups, we have a lot of changes taking place, and it's really hand in glove how that affects talent, because the thing that we all looked for in the accounting profession was, we're going to join this firm, we're going to work very hard, we're going to be successful, they're going to teach us the ropes, and then we're going to be a partner in this accounting, we're going to be partners in this accounting firm, and then we're going to have a seat at the table on decisions on what's going on and everything else, and we're going to also make a lot of money, and that still exists, but the model is definitely changing because of private equity. And so we have to acknowledge that this alternative practice structure that we're going into now is going to change things up. But what I think generally is that there is a lot of interest in accounting. There's not a lot of understanding of it, and I will say that accounting is very, there are parts of it, the constitution level things, assets plus liabilities equals equity, debits equal credits, those kinds of things Um, I don't know why, but I have a lot of friends that teach principles of accounting, and I will just say that for some reason that is not resonating very well with some of the folks. Again, with some of the students, and so that's coming along now. The other thing we have to remember here is that as a profession, we like to complain. Okay, we like to whine about things sometimes, and I think we do an excessive amount of whining about the amount of time we have to work during busy season, trying to out victim the other person. Say, oh yeah, well I charged 100 hours for 3 weeks in a row. Come on. I mean, there is a lot of drudgery in this, but every profession has periods when you have to work exceptionally hard if you want to be successful. And if you don't want to be successful and you want a 40-hour job, those are abundant. You can go get those all over the place. Now, they may not make what you like, but you can get a 40-hour week job. But I think generally it's a matter of, I think accounting does have an image problem, and I think we have to look in the mirror and realize that our own complaining about things and the culture we have that permits us to whine at the level that we do about difficult things like busy season. And I'm not trying to say that it's not very difficult, okay? But one of the things you've actually told me during your current adversity, during your adversity, Randy, is that, well, I could feel sorry for myself, but what good would that do about anything? Okay. And I think it's important that we get our culture right. And I think the talent problem in many ways is a direct result of our self-indulgent whining about the difficulty of practice, and us allowing ourselves to be driven beyond the point of reasonableness in the search of the almighty dollar during compressed parts of the year. And so I think generally, and I think this came out in Jennifer Lee Wilson and her panel, her Blue Ribbon Panels group, um, on the profession. But I think it's important that we also understand that we don't talk about the things that are glorious about this profession. The sense of satisfaction we get when something is completed successfully, the sense of accomplishment you get when somebody has a significant liquidity event, the satisfaction we get when we execute a tax strategy that results in somebody saving, you know, six, seven, eight figures worth of dollars. I think it's very important that we understand that when we complain about the hours, we can't always talk about the wins. And I think we have to balance that so that people understand that you're not just signing up to be, to be Brian the calculator operator. Okay. There is much more, and again, the people is the most important part of this. And I think if we back up here and we can try to tell a better story about what accounting is, I think you'll see more and more people be interested in it.
Well, so you really got to what was my first point, because from the National Pipeline Advisory Report, there were several conclusions, and two of the topics that our groups discussed at great length was how our profession is not telling a very good story. And, that was really about the things that you just talked about. And the question they ask, which I thought was fascinating when we went around the room, is how am I telling the story? And I realized I don't tell that story very well. And everybody at our table, I believe, who were all well known professionals, didn't tell the story very well. And I could hear the table to our left and the table to our right also saying the same things. And if you get nothing else out of this particular episode, but to be able to tell your story as a practicing professional, why you like it, why it's a good business to be in, what the rewards are, I think that's a key learning of today's podcast. But there was a few other things that were there. The second major one that we discussed was trying to make the employment experience better. Now, you and I, Brian, have talked about that for a good 5 years. I think one of our earliest podcasts was on client experience. And there are a lot of vendors that are trying to build better client experience. But this is more than just products. It's about the salaries, it's about the benefits, it's about the projects that people can work on, the engagements that they're responsible for, how soon you get people into engagements that are not reconciling a bank statement, things that actually are not run in a calculator, trying to use your words earlier. Now, there's a few other findings of the National Pipeline Report, but I would actually prefer that download and read the summaries yourself and make your own conclusions out of it. That's really key. But also, there is uh, a commitment to helping recruitment for the National Pipeline Report. And if you've not searched out and made that type of commitment, I think that's another thing that's really critical here. The main thing that I'm concerned for is I want new generations of accountants to have the same relational values that accountants have had for decades. And I don't value transactional relationships as much, although that's the popular thing today. And again, I'm not trying to tell you how to live your life. I'm just saying I understand the value of relationships. I think many of you as listeners understand the value of relationships. And as you all know, relationships take work. And you can make a transaction, but you don't have a relationship in most of those cases. And I think most practitioners that I know that are good are relational people.
Yeah, I don't think you can, I don't think you can make, I think if you're selling a transaction, if you're selling a tax return rather than you're selling trust and credibility and it's going to be okay and this is the right answer, if you're not, if you're selling that basic service and not selling the experience of it and you know the it's going to be okay part of it. um, I think you're missing the boat here. But we have an interesting profession. It is somewhat abstract. It's different than other things. But we're really headed, I think, in many ways to a world where we are all almost exclusively digital plumbers, and we're troubleshooting when things go wrong, just like a plumber does. Randy just had a pipe burst at his home, and he walked into his home and there was water streaming out of the ceiling. And he said, well, I've got a burst pipe and now I have to take action based on this. And I think in many ways, when technology takes over these things, our jobs are going to be different, just like it's different than me being a calculator operator back in the early 90s. The job changes, but we're still troubleshooting things and figuring things out. I'll say that this last weekend, my lawnmower broke down. Okay, so I have a lawnmower I use to mow one of my bee yards, and it's a push mower. I looked at it and I saw fuel dripping out of it, and I said, "Oh, it's probably the fuel hose. It's the fuel hose from the gas tank is leaking." And I looked at it and replaced it. And then I thought back to the fact that my father, when I worked on when he had to work on the lawnmower, he had me sit and help hand him tools so that I could learn from him, seeing the repairs being made, and I could ask him questions about how does this work, and he could say things like, well, to make an engine work, you have to have air, you have to have fuel, and you have to have spark. And if you don't have any one of those, it's not going to work. Uh, we have to do the same thing with our staff people and bring them along in those more difficult situations and let them watch us work so that and we have to narrate what we're doing so that they can learn, just like I did, that what I needed to do as soon as I saw it, I said, oh yeah, I need to load this up. I need to go to the auto parts store. I need to get some chemical, some rubber, some gasoline grade hose at the auto parts store and a couple of hose clamps, and I need to replace this hose. And I replaced it, and guess what? It worked. Okay. Dad's teaching worked. And that's the thing that I think we've got to do is we've got to allow those younger staff to be in the room when the hard decisions are made and to be in the room when conflict occurs so that they understand how to handle and navigate these very personal, very sensitive financial conversations that we have. And we need to make them feel like they're an essential part of the team so that when they're out on their own, they will feel confident doing that. And so that that they know that they're really learning the skills they need to move to the next level and to take their career to where it needs to go, rather than just sitting around belly aching about, well, I had to work 75 hours this week. Well, life's hard. Get a help. It happens sometimes. Okay. But what you miss the fact that, and I went and saw 2 Broadway shows, and I took my family to New York City for 3 days and had a great experience. I think we have to balance it all out here and remind ourselves that this story's out here, and we have to share we have to do. I thought I was not excited about holding the screwdrivers and getting tools like that for Dad. But now that he's gone, I realize he taught me how to fix small engines, and that's cool. And I think we have to take the same approach here out of love for our staff to teach them how to deal with these difficult situations and to show them the alternatives for approach so that they don't feel like, so that they feel like that they're really getting value out of it, because there is value to be shared. And I think about how you've mentored me and brought me along a lot of places I wouldn't have gone, and it's helped me immensely in my development. And I think that the more we do this, the more we narrate these things that we could get done faster if we just did them by ourselves and shut up. But if we would take an interest in developing our staff, I think there would be I think a lot of this talent problem would disappear in the long term.
So I appreciate, Brian, the mention on the mentor. I've mentored many people and happy to do that for you and others as I think about it. And if a second takeaway for you today is this idea that really one of your jobs is to mentor others in life. And all the years that we've known each other, I guess I'd never heard your dad mower repair story. Now think about that, friends, because Brian and I have known each other 20 years. And
Randy, it just happened last week.
well, I understand, but I mean the dad teaching you happened decades ago, I suspect. But what our listeners don't know is, I was raised in a neighborhood where my grandfather taught me to repair Briggs and Stratton and Clinton engines on mowers, and I know the difference. And I can repair a Model T because of him, but I can do electrical because of my neighbor to the south who was in the Navy, and I can do architecture and bricklaying because of my neighbor to the north. And I can do carpentry because of another neighbor slightly to the north. And so I learned how to do all those things by tagging along, watching, and they'd say, here, take this hammer, and here's how you drive a nail properly. And that's what we're going to have to do, because when AI takes over jobs like tax prep, how do we teach how to hold the hammer and so forth? It's going to be a real deal. Now, just two comments that I'll make
But
is
AI, but like the apprentice, AI is going to blow it sometimes on things, and we will still have to fix it. Okay,
yeah,
so the job is still there. It's just going to be different, and the tools are going to be different.
yeah. So, two other learnings for me in these days, and we really heard it from Mark Koziol again last night, is that because of the alternative business structures, and it's been done for 25 years, 30 years actually, it started in 1995, that CPAs are frequently not listing their credentials for liability mitigation. And there's going to be a movement around that. And at this point, as of the time we recorded this session, there were 14 states that now have an alternative pathway to becoming certified. And portability is going to become a bit more of an issue as we would see it. But we're going to have to continue to work with our team to improve the value of the credentials and the value of accounting to the clients because they don't even sometimes know how to ask for the services that they need. And you have to help them many times get themselves out of places where they've created their own problems. But your people have to have enough experience that they also can do those jobs. In other words, this isn't individual sport. This is a team sport. So we think the team is always stronger. So Brian, any other closing thoughts?
I think we need to generally work on the story we tell about what we do and about the profession, and we need to actively actively spend time with our junior staff people and make them feel heard and help them understand what's going through our head when we're dealing with those incredibly difficult situations, and help bring them along through and develop, because that's the thing that I think is most rewarding. I look at the things I've taught my own son and the things I've taught staff people that I've worked with over the years, and the I think there's its own reward when you help somebody achieve their potential. And I think we have to work harder at that and stop chasing life 6 minutes, 15 minutes at a time. We have to invest in our people, and that means we're going to have to spend time with them. That means it's going to take longer to do things because we're explaining what the heck's going on. But we are building skills that, again, like my fixing the lawnmower, you know, 50 years later, here it is. Okay. And we may never see that come directly out. Um, but I think it's important that we aggressively teach our team how we would want things to be handled, and spend time with them and try to help them be the best they can be. Maybe we teach them skills that they never use on our behalf, but somebody invested in you beyond what they had to in order to make you the person you are today. And I think we all have a role in paying that debt forward.
Well, it is clear that we value you individually as a listener, your contributions to the accounting profession, and the values that you contribute to society as a whole. We understand it. I hope we've helped you think it through a little better too. We'll see you in another technology lab. Good day.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. We'll be back next Saturday with a new episode of the Technology Lab from CPA Practice Advisor. Have a great week.